Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to yet another investor forum. As usual, we'll be starting this year with the Honourable Fayval Williams, MP, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, who I think has been joining us for about 4 years on the run now. We've been doing this for about 10 years in a run, having the Minister of Finance join our program early in the year. So thank you for being with us, Minister.
Thank you for having me.
We look forward to discussions on the economy. And also joining me on the panel today will be Christopher Berry, our chairman of the group, and Patrick Bataille, our CEO of Mayberry Investments Limited. Welcome, Chris.
Hi.
Welcome, Patrick. Thanks for joining us again. Okay,
Thanks,
folks.
David.
As usual, please stick around until the end of the program where we'll be addressing your Q&A questions. So please feel free to send in your questions now, and the minister will be addressing those questions at the end of the program. So don't forget to post them now in the chat, and we'll address as many as we can. Also, if you find yourself tuning in every week but you still haven't subscribed, well, here's your chance. Hit the subscribe button and click the bell to stay updated to our weekly content. Also, if you're looking to embark on your very first investment journey, you should take that first step with Mayberry, of course. Follow us on social media or visit www.mayberryinv.com to learn more about how you can get started on your investment journey today. Well, let me introduce you to none other than the Honourable Fayval Williams, who of course is our Minister of Finance. She is a chartered financial analyst by profession, CFA. She has a Master's of Business Administration with a concentration in finance from the Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania, and a Bachelor of Arts, cum laude, I might add, in economics from the University of Harvard. She's the first female Minister of Finance and the Public Service, and has been a Member of Parliament for St. Andrew, where I live, since March 2016, St. Andrew Easter. Yeah, that's where I live. He has served the government of Jamaica in various posts as Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, Ministry of Finance, Energy and Technology, where we interacted when she was Minister of Energy, and most recently, before that, as Minister of Education and Youth. Minister Williams is a former Executive Director of Kingston Properties Limited. Prior to that, she served as a Chief Investment Officer of JMB Limited with investment responsibilities spanning the trading department, investment research, and pensions. She's also served as the head of valuation pricing team for JMB's public offerings, so she knows a thing or two about taking companies public. She's consulted with the FSC in the area of research and policy, and before moving back to Jamaica was Senior Vice President at Putnam Investments, a top 10 global mutual fund manager. Her investment work spans a wide cross-section of industries and includes portfolio management responsibility for an equity portfolio product that has led Putnam's efforts to incubate a market-neutral hedge fund. Today, the Minister will share with us a review of the Jamaican economy, and we'll be talking about performance in 2025 and looking at the outlook for 2026. So without that, Minister, I once again want to welcome you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here again, another year, speaking about the Jamaican economy, trying to look into the future to see if we can divine what the future outcome will be after having gone through a Category 5 hurricane that has devastated the island, especially the western part of it. So we're here to have a conversation.
I like that. We've had like two black swan events in the last 5 years, right? When I think of COVID and I think of Melissa, these are events that you really don't expect to happen again. So tell us about 2025. How did we pan out the year? How would you say the economy has performed overall in 2025 when we consider the impacts of Melissa? And I want to talk eventually about the outlook for 2026. But let's start with 2025, the year that
Right.
was.
So fiscal year 2025,
Yeah.
26. It's only another 2 or so months to go to end this fiscal year. Yesterday, I took the fourth supplementary to
Oh, wow.
Parliament to make some adjustments to the budget because there was additional spending that we had to take into the budget, and that had to do with the $10 billion to be given as grants
Okay.
to persons who had suffered damage to their homes, significant damage, moderate damage, little damage, but still need some help. So we had to account for that. That was $10 billion. And then there was another amount to be allocated to the Ministry of Health and Wellness for work that they need to do there, and so on. $3 billion to go to DBJ for on lending to small, medium enterprises. So we took that adjustment to Parliament, which meant our expenditure went up. As you know, when we end the year and when we look at the figures, we'll see a significant decline in tax revenues in particular, because obviously following Melissa, there was quite a bit of impact on businesses, on individuals, and also there's quite a bit of give up, especially at the ports, because we made it easier for persons to send relief items, no customs duty, taxes, and so on. So there is, when you look at the numbers, you'll see the decline in tax revenues, and you'll see the increase in the expenditure because we had to respond to the hurricane. We had to go out with significant relief for persons, and that will be reflected in the budget for this fiscal year that we're closing.
Okay. So, when I think of how the economy's performed, for the last 8 to 10 years at the macro level, how did we do in 2025, 26 when we think of the headliners like, inflation, unemployment, debt to GDP? These are sort of very
Yes.
critical indicators that we've looked at in the track record for the last 10 years, albeit for the slight interruption from COVID, and then the amazing recovery after COVID has been quite enviable. How did we
And
do
don't
in this
forget
fiscal year?
Barrel. Don't
Yeah, and
forget
Beryl, yes, yes, yes.
in there.
How have the numbers panned out in terms of, inflation,
In terms of
unemployment, debt to GDP?
those years coming into
Yeah.
this one,
Yeah.
well, we saw inflation that was really under control within the policy band during most of the time. Obviously, during COVID, we went outside of the band, during Beryl as well. And so far, during Melissa, we haven't seen
And
we
a
haven't
huge
seen it.
spike.
No, because actually we came into Melissa with very, very low inflation. If you recall, we were below
Yes, the target range.
the target range,
Of 4 to 6.
and we've seen it since then come back into the target range, primarily because of food prices. I mean, as to be expected after a hurricane, agricultural prices went through the roof in the market. But we're seeing that moderate now, and I would expect that at the next reading of inflation, it would, still continue to be within the band.
Unemployment? How are you feeling about unemployment?
Unemployment 3.3% at the last read in December, I
Okay.
believe, from Statin. Still a good number for us. I know that the tourism sector suffered quite a bit. We may see it reflected in the next set of numbers that come out, but at 3.3%, that's really, really low for Jamaica.
Absolutely.
Historically. I mean, you have
Absolutely.
to, I don't know what period you have to go back to
Yeah,
see those kinds of numbers.
outside of the last 20 years,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And
And then the debt to
Yeah,
GDP,
debt to
which is
GDP.
a very important indicator.
We have gotten to a low of maybe 67%, I want to say.
When got it would,
We're
yeah.
getting there. We're getting there.
Right. So our goal was, we know that we were going to get to the 60%, very close to 60%
Yeah.
as we end the fiscal year that we're in, but we were thrown off course by Melissa. So with the GDP declining, and us having to take on some more debt, that ratio we projected by the end of this fiscal year that we're in would be at about 68
Okay, well, that's still pretty
plus.
good. So it'll be less than 70%, is what you're thinking.
Right,
Okay.
right.
North of
And
the peak.
Yes,
yeah,
yes. We're coming
and
from
we're
140%.
yeah,
So, yes.
right. So that's why I say to people when they ask about debt to GDP, when we were always talking about it and wanting to get to the 60%, I say to them, here is why. We need to get to a low debt to GDP so you have the flexibility when we go through disasters
These
like
exogenous
a
shocks.
Melissa.
Yeah,
You have
yeah,
the room
yeah,
to go to a 68%
yeah,
without the rating agencies, raising an alarm
yeah.
because it's still within the band for countries with our credit rating. So this is why we need to get to 60 and below
Yes, yeah,
to be
yeah.
able to respond, when we have disasters.
Also, we've gone, I want to say 10 years without any new taxes. So we look forward to the next fiscal year. I know you're not going to answer me here now, but could there be an 11th year possibly without
Well,
new
we have
taxes?
been the government, as you said, that has delivered 10 years of no new taxes. We are going through significant upheaval in the economy, and I don't believe that people would be expecting for us to remain at that same level this um, during the aftermath of Melissa.
No,
Um,
probably go down. Yeah, because people need to recover.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, she's giving a $10 billion stimulus package. Should I call it tip stimulus or relief package?
Relief,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
see it as relief,
Okay.
but because persons have suffered quite a bit, a lot, and we have to help them back on their
Right.
feet. We have to help the small businesses.
Yeah.
You would have seen ministers like Minister Hill out there with the small businesses, helping them to, rebuild their shops, um, helping them with supplies, with generators. You've seen other ministers, Minister Green in the agricultural sector, with seeds to farmers, fertilizer, technical assistance from RADA, and so on. And I have to say, hats off to our farmers. They really got up and just went back into the field as quickly as they could after Melissa. I mean, I was shocked when Minister Green was posting just a few weeks after Melissa, fields with lettuce looking green and lush. And we're seeing prices moderate in the markets now relative to right after Melissa. So I want to say to our farmers all across Jamaica, we appreciate you for what you've done.
Excellent. And rating agencies, we've seen where the outlook for Jamaica has been upheld. So we've gone through a crazy storm and nobody's come to
Well, they've
say, affirm.
affirmed their rating.
Yes,
They did move the outlook
right.
a little bit, but to have had Moody's upgrade
Yes,
your rating
yes.
after a
After
category
hurricane.
5
Yeah, that's amazing.
hurricane, it's something that
Unheard of.
yeah, unheard of. And when you read what they wrote about Jamaica, one of the things they highlighted is the institutions that we have put in place over the last 10 years. We put in place buffers to help us through the economy, or layered approach in terms of our risk financing instruments that we've had in place. That helped significantly because we were able to respond as soon as rain stopped falling. We were able to
Yeah.
respond, and if we didn't have that, I'm sure I couldn't imagine the misery that people would be in and that the economy would be in. So we will continue to strengthen those buffers as a small developing country sitting in a hurricane zone. Um, it we have to just continue to have these buffers, financial buffers in place to allow us to move swiftly, because that will make the difference between whether we recover over the next 3-4 years versus 10,
Yeah.
15 years
Yeah.
down the road. Yeah.
And that's been, unfortunately, the history of the past, that we would experience a hurricane like Gilbert and then take 20 years to recover. and then experience a hurricane like Ivan and take 5 years to recover. And what we're seeing here when we spoke to the macroeconomic indicators is they've really stood fairly firm. Unemployment, inflation, debt to GDP maybe shifts by 8 percentage points, but you can see where we could recover within two
Right.
fiscals and get back to the 60% target, presumably. Chairman, I've been hogging the show. I'm sure you have lots of questions for the minister, and we would like to keep this to be a discussion. And of course, Patrick, I know you have a few questions as well too. So, Chairman, over to you. Let me allow
Yes,
you to ask.
Minister. So happy to have you again.
Thank you.
I'm very happy that, you're helping us to continue this tradition. It's more than 10 years now, Dan. It's so long I can't remember.
Right, right.
And it's not really for Mayberry, it's for all the investors in Jamaica, not only the Mayberry investors. So the first question I have, outside of tourism and what are the major areas you think private investors should be looking at for 2026 as their own investments or areas where they might want to partner with the government to do something?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because the Prime Minister announced NARA, which is a National Recovery, Reconstruction and Resilience Authority. And it is that agency that's coordinating, prioritizing all the big projects that we want to do. And that is the agency that will partner with private sector because, in the financing package that was announced by our multilateral financial institutions, in that 6.7 billion US dollars that was announced, 2.4 billion of it was earmarked for private sector, um, for the private sector, because, and I'm sure I'll agree, government can't do it all. Government shouldn't do it all. Government should identify those projects that can produce a stream of cash flows, projects that are bankable to the private sector, and have the private sector come in. As my young people would say, Minister, you have to crowd in the private sector to help accelerate this recovery that we'd love to see. So as you can imagine, there are lots of roads to be built, water system. And in the water sector, we've seen private sector investment in the water sector with a PPP, a big,
big project.
big PPP, big project come in. There are other sectors that private sector can look at as well. Or port development. I can tell you, like 2 days ago, I was coming in from, I guess, Portmore area. I guess I hadn't gone out there in a while. And when I looked across the port, I was pleasantly surprised to see the expansion that was going on there. And we have other ports in Jamaica that are in need of development as well. There are so many projects, I believe, that the private sector can play a role in. And I'd love to see them engage with the Prime Minister through the NARA as the Prime Minister prioritizes the big projects that we have to do.
And that 2.4 billion is not just about restoration. This is just about expansion projects, just good projects, or
Yes, it's beyond restoration.
Right.
It has to include resilience as well,
okay.
but it's projects that will contribute meaningfully to GDP growth. Because if we're going to be using debt financing in all of this, we have to ensure that there is a return on the funds that are put to work.
Great. Well, we look forward to that. Has a framework been created? Is it going to be under a particular minister to help manage that project?
The Prime Minister, he has been speaking with all the ministers across, in the cabinet. They've come and they're technical people, and with their best ideas about the project. So the next step would be to prioritize those and begin the procurement process in terms of finding the appropriate partners and investors to come in.
Okay, we look forward to that. Another one for you, Chairman?
Yes, so we had a really big hurricane last year. Our debt to GDP is really at an all-time low. Is now the time for a counter-cyclical approach to, the interest rate and liquidity policy to help businesses to recover? Your comments on that?
Well, first of all, let me say I love your opening. You're saying historical lows in GDP, and I guess you're taking the long look because we're coming from highs, 140%. So we're still.
You said GDP, Minister.
I'm sorry, debt to GDP,
Yeah.
debt to GDP,
Yeah.
debt to GDP.
No, I think it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, you have other countries like US at 90%, Japan 200%. I mean, we were at 140 and we don't have that kind of powerful economy. So for us to achieve the 67% in such a short time, I think it's remarkable.
So in your question, I think you're referring to where interest rates are in the
Interest rates and
economy.
liquidity. I mean, we got hammered with basically 700 basis point hike over, and it's been, we have had a couple hundred basis points pull back, but now is a time for rebuilding. Is that going to be part of the policy mix, or what's your view, or what's likely?
Well, to that, I would say, that the Bank of Jamaica has a mandate for inflation targeting and making sure inflation doesn't get out of control in Jamaica, because that's one of the ills we don't want to have revisited on us again. In all the things that I've read that they've put out, that's their concern. But I do get the sense that once they are satisfied that inflation is not going to get away from us, again, in their publication, that's the sense I'm getting, that they, of course, would revisit.
Good deal, and it speaks to, again, some of the framework policy changes we've made. We have an independent central bank that's dealing with inflation targeting, and the Minister of Finance can no longer pick up the phone and say, lower interest rates, increase liquidity. And so perhaps we need to have the Richard Biles one day on the program to talk to the governor of the Bank of Jamaica to understand how he feels about monetary policy, managing liquidity in particular, as you said. But I think what Chairman's alluding to is the fact that the interest rates are still relatively high, and so that puts pressure on the entire market. And so I think if we could see lower interest rates, perhaps we could see the banks then passing on those lower spreads. One of the things I'm excited about, though, that is within your purview, you spoke to the DBJ and them getting $3 billion of funding, and so we do hope that they will be quite successful in pushing that through the banking system, where they do contain the spreads that the banks, the intermediaries, are allowed to on-lend that money at. So we'll be excited to hear more about that program. What's the target interest rate that they hope to be lending at, and then the on-lending rate, because we think that's very important to create some more impetus to the market, both for folks to recover and, as you said, for resilience building.
And one of the things that DBJ did during the year, last year, they rolled up the fees into the loan, making it easier for
reducing upfront costs towards accessing the borrowing. Okay, that's great.
I have a suggestion for you, Minister. So, now that we have made the BOJ independent, I think their mandate needs to be expanded. It can't be just about inflation. And in fact, my view, a lot of the inflation cannot really be influenced by interest rates, because a lot of it is imported. And in the case of Melissa, when you have a situation like that and you increase interest rates, you actually dampen down production, so it actually makes inflation worse because people can't redeploy capital to productive methods to fix the shortage that was created by the whole catastrophe. So I think the government needs to have growth as part of the BOJ mandate, because we can manage inflation down to zero, and
Have no growth.
people, the average Jamaican, although employed, because we have the lowest unemployment we have had in the history of Jamaica. But when you look at the wages in Jamaica and compare them to the rest of the Caribbean, it's actually cheese to chalk. And that's one of the reasons we're constantly, the private sector, and I've heard several other ministers complaining that we're running out of labor. We must run out of labor because to do the same job in Bahamas, you're going to get 3 times the pay what you get in Jamaica. So Jamaicans are going to be seeking out those opportunities. So I think the government needs to look at the BOJ mandate. It can't be just inflation, inflation, inflation. What do you think about that? What's your comment?
I know,
Well, don't say
I
anything,
know,
Minister.
Don't get her in trouble.
Leave it on me.
But you,
No, well, I'm just saying, we've seen the dual mandate in other countries. So where, their central bank has to be concerned not just with inflation, but with growth as well. I would say for Jamaica, we're just beginning that journey. We just moved to inflation targeting. And for me, because I've been around when we had 70, 80% inflation.
hyperinflation.
Yes.
So, Minister, I don't want you to go down that road. And let me tell you why. So, one of the things that's very fresh in my mind was when we had that IMF agreement in 2013, when we were falling off the cliff. And a few years after that, I had lunch with the fellow who was in charge of the Jamaica program with the IMF. And at that time, interest rates were very low. Interest rates were actually negative. And I asked him, in the previous 20 years of me operating in finance in Jamaica, this was absolutely sacrosanct. And his comment to me was, based on where Jamaica was at the time, the risk of not having growth was so serious that they would rather have a little inflation. I think now we have gone the opposite side of the pendulum, and we're not looking at the balance between growth and inflation, especially on an island where, almost everything is imported. So when you hike up the interest rate in Jamaica, you're not affecting inflation. It's not made here. The prices are feeding in from foreign. So I've heard too much of this anti-inflation talk. I want my Jamaican people to have a better standard of living, which the only way we can get that is some
It's
growth.
with more growth, with
More
stronger
growth.
stronger growth, but we cannot take our hands off the inflation.
For
We
30
can't.
years, I've
We
been hearing
can't.
about this
We
inflation,
can't.
and my
We can't
people
take
still
it off.
poor.
We can't.
Yes.
We can't take our hands off the
Yes.
wheel for inflation, but we have to get stronger growth.
I think we need to be a little bit braver and more effective in terms of challenging this growth issue. Even in our best years, even when we're not rebounding from a serious fall off like in COVID and other times in the past, we just can't seem to pass 2% growth.
But
And that is
I have
telling
to
me,
say though, Chris, come on.
no,
The climate risk is significant for Jamaica. Take a look at the history of climate risk for Jamaica.
I
I
accept
mean,
that.
this
But even when we
fiscal year,
don't
Chris,
have
this
climate
fiscal
events,
year,
we have never.
So you mean
We've
over the
been-
last 20 years,
we
30
have been-
years,
but
growth
then
has
it
been
takes us a
evasive?
while.
Is anemic.
Yes, yes,
I'm
yes.
not.
Other
excusing it.
countries
Yes.
that have climate risk
Yes.
have higher growth than us.
Yes.
Our growth rate
Yes.
is consistently anemic
Yeah.
for the last 30 years. And I think we need to put some of our best brains on it, Minister. They were doing something wrong. And I'm not pointing a finger at you because this was a problem long before you got in the chair.
Chris, I agree with you that we have to get stronger growth in the country in order to lift our per capita um, income for people. That goes without question. I'd love to get there. We have to get some new industries in
Yes.
Jamaica.
Let's talk about that.
Yes, especially in the tech world. Um, we are doing our part as government. Yesterday, I announced in Parliament that the government would be involved in ensuring that Jamaica has adequate subsea capacity. When you look at the data, we do a high percentage of what we do on our computers. It has to go subsea to the United States or to other countries and back. We want to bring prices down in the telecom sector as a way to attract new businesses to Jamaica, and as a way for all those young people for whom telecommunication is the engine for their business. We want to bring prices down. And as a government, when we look at the landscape, that's one of the ways that we can do it. And we are doing it.
Great. Patrick, you've been quiet because we've been so busy in here. I'm sure you have one or two questions for the minister. I'd love for you to come in at this point in time.
Sure, Dan, thank you. No, great conversation. One of the questions, and Minister, you've touched it in a few different places, but what are your base case outlooks for the country over the next 24 months? And what do you believe are the two top variables that may materially change that?
All right, so as we complete this fiscal year, we are looking at negative 3 to 6. That's the PIOJ's
Okay. For
projection
growth?
for GDP growth, looking forward into the next fiscal year. Still a negative, but less. We're expecting it to be less as we recover. And then beyond that, our expectation is that we'll start seeing, a positive number going out there in terms of GDP growth. Obviously, to augment that, we have to look at, as I keep saying, new industries or making the existing ones grow faster. Agriculture, there's a lot of potential in agriculture, not just in planting and reaping, but we've been talking about going higher up in the value chain.
Agro-processing.
Right. So you have seen where there's been a lot of investment in ensuring that in our agricultural areas there's irrigation. Has been spending, and there'll be more in terms of storage in the sector. You know, and training people, getting businesses to go higher up on the value chain, not just to reap the food from the field, but to see how we can process more of that and export it. So that's one area. Or water sector, water and sewage. Why is that important? Take this city of Kingston, for instance. What I hear from the minister is if we can significantly upgrade the water and sewage system in Kingston, what that will do is that it would allow us to build higher buildings in Kingston, kind of have Kingston go through a renaissance, if you will. But now we're constrained in that with the old infrastructure that's here. So there are many things that can be done in the economy. It requires investment, and with this opportunity, with the funds that we have access to, we are going to use it and ensure that we get higher growth from it.
So this is the 7.6 billion we're talking about?
6.7.
6.7. So you see that as being one of the key variables to helping do the infrastructure improvements to
Yes,
facilitate growth.
we have to use it for that.
Right,
It can't be for recurring
right.
expenses. It has to be for capital that is long lasting and will deliver growth in the economy.
Okay, and then we've heard of I called it stimulus package. Do you imagine in the financial year ended 27 that you may have to do something else like that in terms of stimuli to help again jumpstart the economy for folks who are trying to rebuild coming out of the hurricane, the less fortunate, etc.
Right. So we will continue to ensure that the DBJ has funding
Right,
for the SMEs.
got it.
We will be more aggressive in terms of our equity markets as well. You know that the micro market is coming down the pike for smaller companies. We've had success in the junior market, and we want smaller companies to gain access to equity capital. Obviously, those smaller companies would be the stronger smaller companies um, that could use equity capital. We want to look to see how we can broaden the range of investments for pension funds, for insurance
Okay.
companies, obviously still paying attention to the risk parameters. But our pension funds, there's a lot of money when you look, there's a lot
They're
of money.
quite
Yes.
constrained now,
Yes,
you know,
right. So
from a
obviously
regulatory perspective.
we'll do the
Okay.
work in
That's-
terms of the risk profile,
Yep.
but to ensure that they have a little bit more room to invest. And when you look at other countries with strong pension funds, their pension funds invest quite a bit in their economies. And so that's an area.
Yep,
as well.
that's a welcome one. I know that there's a huge constraint on their ability to do private equity. And so there are a lot of constraints. So I think that would be a welcome change to allow them to revisit their SIP, Statement of
Yes,
Investment
yes,
Policies,
yes.
within the regulatory
So I've already
requirements.
asked the
Okay.
FSC
Okay.
to do the work, to look at that and come back to me.
One big
Yeah.
mistake I think we're making, Minister, is increasing the amount of money they can invest abroad. They should be investing locally because we need the investments here.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that entirely. And there was there used to be a difference between what the FSC limit was and the BOJ limit. You know, one used to say 20 and one used to say 5. I forget where we landed, but I agree wholeheartedly with Chris. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with Chris. And I think that would certainly be a good place to look at. Patrick, one more for you. I'm sure you got more.
Yeah, I think we've been talking a bit about it just now, but Minister, what policies do you think could deepen our capital market?
Well, yeah,
We
we
talked
just
a bit about pensions just now.
we just spoke to some of that, the micro market, looking at our pension funds in terms of their asset allocation. Um, I believe we still need to get more Jamaicans investing in the market. Obviously, that's going to take some education for people to understand the risk return of equity markets. I would love to see a robust bond market as
Yes,
well.
absolutely.
Yes, I have been pursuing Caracris. I know they're already in this market and they rate some of the companies that are here, but I have been engaging with them about rating Jamaica, the government of
Right.
Jamaica. So there's a benchmark against which companies can benchmark themselves, and the market would be able to better price, I believe, the debt of companies. So because they don't have a risk-free rate against which to benchmark that. So those are some of the things that I'm looking at to deepen our capital markets. And I know Mayberry is just right in the middle of it.
We'll always be there trying to encourage that. And while I'm proud of, what we've achieved in the capital markets in the last, decade, particularly since the introduction of the junior market, and, we're the biggest capital markets within the Caribbean region by far, but still a market that only has 85 publicly listed companies for the size of our economy. It's still quite small, and we would really love to see more companies coming to market. And I will confess, Minister, one of the challenges I think we face, putting on my Mayberry hat when we go out there and try to, encourage folks to join the market. I'm going to be brutal with this, is the our tax collection system really needs to be improved because I think the compliance is so low that when we approach folks and say, hey, did you know if you go to the junior market, you get this tax break and you spell out what the tax break, you get quite a few snickers like taxes, like what's that? There's just so many folks we find out there that aren't paying their fair share of taxes that this thing that we're offering them is an incentive because it's so easy for them to elude corporate taxes and taxes at the wharf. So we find a lot of folks who are importing goods, have a huge competitive advantage. And so I would seek to challenge you to get your tax folks to beef up. And there are industries where we have folks who have gone public, let's say hardware stores. And so you have a easy benchmark for what the profitability of hardware stores are because you've got 2 or 3 listed hardware stores. And then I assure you, you're going to have these private hardware stores, not going to call the name, who help facilitate money laundering and integration, by the way, do billions and trillions of dollars in sales. And I guarantee you, when you look at their tax returns, the tax returns are going to be minuscule. And so it's an area where I do feel, in terms of support for the market, that if we tighten up on the tax collection and make it more difficult for these guys to duck taxes, and you can do the benchmarking because we've got supermarkets on the stock exchange and hardware stores, just those 2 industries alone. I promise you, if you go out and started to do some kind of benchmarking audit of the private supermarkets and the private hardware stores and try to tie it back to their GCT returns or whatever, you're going to discover there's a significant amount of tax evasion that's taking place, both from a corporate tax perspective and from paying duties at the wharves.
Yeah,
And
I agree. And those are 2 areas we're looking at. I know that the TAJ just recently they put in a procurement. They went, to upgrade their software to help them, obviously, to manage and to look at and to do analytics on the data that they get in. And at the port, we are looking at new software as well. It's whiz bang
Minister,
software.
you know the best way to get more money from the port?
Let me hear it.
Lower the duties.
lower the duties.
So what's happening is, think of it like this. For the last 50 years, you guys invest billions of dollars to catch the people who are beating the system. But you haven't. And you never will, because the incentive that they have is so huge. And they are driving legitimate business out of business. If the rates were low, you get the duty, you get the corporate tax, because all those people who are paying the duties at the right rates are also paying the corporate tax. And you eliminate a lot of the underground. You have done everything, and the governments before you, to try and control it by laws and regulation, but you're not going to win because the duties are way too high. So the financial incentive for beating the system is high. You only need to do it for 5 years and you can retire for the rest of your life.
So it's a good point because I think of illicit cigarettes, for instance, and how we see how that impacts the listed company Carreras, right? And they'll tell you, 35, 40% of the market is filled with illicit cigarettes because the taxes, the tariffs are so high. And so there's a good point to be made
Well, that's
there.
not a good example because that's like a sin tax. Alcohol and cigarettes have high taxes everywhere. But the principle is the same.
Yeah, the principle is the same. And I
The
mean,
higher it is, the more bandoli you're going to get.
yes. And in the case of Carib Cement, for instance, in case of Couriers, I beg your pardon, you can see how much they contribute to the economy in terms of paying their fair share of taxes and naturally paying that higher duty regime. So if the tariffs were lower there, Carib Cement would import more. I keep saying Carib Cement. Couriers would import more and pay more taxes and face less leakage to the illicit trade. So I think the principle is the same. So we do want to improve the tax collection, and then we do want to look at the tariffs, as Chris has said, to try to see where we can lower those tariffs and have, better compliance. I think I think that's a good idea. We look at luxury cars, for instance, right? There was a time where those taxes were 180%, and you would rarely see a luxury car in Jamaica. They lowered those tariffs, and now you see a lot more luxury cars, and I suspect you're collecting more duties out of the car. So that's an example of lowering tariffs and us seeing a better result. So yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Patrick, last one for you, and then we're going to go to the questions online because we've only got about 10 minutes left and I can see the questions piling up.
Sure. My last one is if you could give investors advice, one message on policy continuity and predictability, what would it be?
I'm sorry, one message on, could
If you
you,
could give investors one message on policy continuity and predictability, what would it be?
I would say I'm going to choose a policy, the inflation
Okay.
targeting policy, because that is one that will endure into the future because of how it's set up. Yes, we could over time look at the growth component of it. But that is the one that I know that all Jamaicans can have some certainty around its inflation, and that's good for business.
Right.
Businesses don't want to wake up tomorrow and hear that the inflation that was 5% today is 10% tomorrow. So that's a policy that was established, it was implemented, and it has brought certainty into our long-term planning. I remember the time when investors or businesses or individuals could not look beyond the next week or the next month, and now you can look 2, 3, 4, 5 years into the future, knowing that this policy will endure well into the future.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for that. So let me try to take a few questions, and Chairman, you can look and see if there are any that you want to pose as well too. So some of these questions perhaps may have come in before the minister spoke on it. So I did see one question here from Taylor asking about how does the government plan to deepen Jamaica's capital markets so more Jamaicans can participate in meaningful wealth creation beyond traditional savings accounts and real estates. I want to say we spoke to
Yeah,
some of the
yeah.
initiatives that you were going to prepare there. So Taylor, hopefully that's answered your question there. I see Tyrone Richards asking, a policy direction would be good to hear from the ministry in light of the current economic environment, all things considered. So in terms of a policy direction, again, I think you just mentioned
Wow.
some consistency in inflation targeted, some of the things you guys are going to be doing in terms of investing in infrastructure development, using the DBJ to support. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say on that particular one.
Look for new industries
Look for
that
new
we can bring
industries.
to Jamaica, higher that has higher paying potential.
Yeah,
Obviously, we do have to train our people
yeah.
to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. We have industries here that can be expanded as well. And I'm thinking of the new industry, the ship repair
Yes, German ship
industry. Yes,
repair. Yeah,
yes, yes,
yeah.
yes, that can be significantly expanded
A
based on
Mayberry
where we are.
project.
A Mayberry
Yes,
project.
yes, yes, yes.
Mayberry-led
And
project.
that's high skilled, better paying than the average.
Much higher.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
those are industries that we can look to expand. I know the Prime Minister has talked several times about expansion of the port as well. Um, and we're seeing that happen, but it can still do more. Can still
Yes,
do
and of
more.
course, marine logistics is sort of one of the game changers, I think, for Jamaica because, when it comes to marine logistics, we have, the location, location, location. So that's a huge comparative advantage for Jamaica, and it's why we supported the German ship repair project. But there's so much more that we can do in the marine logistics space as a country to sort of transform us, again, because of that comparative advantage we have in terms of positioning, skilled labor, and so on. Of course, Minister, with only 3% unemployed, but there is a vast majority of persons who could make themselves available for the workforce. And I think of the HEART program in that regard. I don't know if you have any thoughts about what they're doing at HEART and how they're helping to train folks and improve the labor force in general.
Right. So in general, Jamaicans have come to know and trust Heart in terms of the training that they provide to our young people. I know they have plans to even go higher in terms of the training. So when persons leave Heart, they can walk into businesses with the confidence, the knowledge to start from day one. Heart is properly funded, very well funded to take on you know, the young people
And
that
do a
are
lot
out
of
there.
certification as well too. So I
Yes,
understand in the construction
absolutely. Yes.
industry, they've been doing a lot
Oh,
of
electrical
certifications.
work. Yeah. Certification is important because that tells the employers
Yes.
that you have some formal training and that you are work ready when
Yep.
you come with
Yep. I think
certification.
they've made a
Yeah.
huge contribution both to tourism and to construction,
Yeah.
which are sort of two very large job providers for the economy. Let's see what else we have here. Good evening, Minister. Please upgrade and modernize the TAJ website. I think it's not user friendly. And that's interesting that, this person, yeah,
The TAJ
THA's website.
website, well, as I said earlier on, they just are going through the procurement process for a new and improved website. The one that's there currently, that's been there for several years,
Yes.
and we've noticed the limitation. We want to make it more user friendly. So they are on that path to
Thanks for that,
procure.
Robert. Of
Yeah.
course, I just paid last week my registration online
Yes.
for the first time.
See,
So I
yeah, yeah,
found
yeah.
that to be very useful. I pay
Absolutely.
my property taxes online
Online,
and I do my fitness fee online. So
online.
I love
So
the
we are,
service. I
yes,
mean, I welcome more
we are
improvement,
moving.
but I
Yeah,
think
we're
it's
moving.
moving in the
Yes.
right direction. So thanks for that. Orville Reeves says the disparity between import and export with all the great, brilliant minds in Parliament, I guess, hasn't improved. And uh, so to help on that point, I think what he's saying, it's an interesting dynamic, and I don't know what the answer is, Chris. I came to Jamaica in 1985 when the dollar was 550 to 1, and we imported 4 times as much as we export. Today, the dollar is 158 to 1, and we still import 4 times as much as we export. So this idea of, devaluing the dollar to give us some kind of competitive advantage and hopefully shift that dynamic hasn't worked. And it goes back to what,
No, but we stopped doing that a long time down.
but it goes back to what you're
Dollar
saying.
has been fairly stable for I can't even know how long.
A decade, but the point
It's
is,
actually revaluing right now.
yeah, the point is we haven't improved the import to export ratio, which creates a fundamental problem.
Ah,
Not to provide an excuse, but when you look at the components of our imports, a large percentage is fuel
Yeah,
that
oil exceeds
we
our
don't
exports.
generate
Yeah,
here in
yeah, yeah.
Jamaica. So any shift towards solar
To
could,
renewables.
yes, to
Yeah,
renewables,
yeah, yeah.
would help.
And we have that ambitious target to try to get to 50% by 2030. So that would certainly help. And so I do agree with you. The resilience push is certainly something that could help reduce our import of oil, which alone exceeds the total exports of the country. But I agree with you, Orville, that we have to have a more sort of focused effort on growth and I would say import substitution. But again, where we have the comparative advantage. So some things we're always going to import because it's actually more efficient to import. And I think we have to focus on our strengths where we don't need to be importing those items because we can produce them competitively and at the right quality in Jamaica. And agriculture is certainly one of those areas because we see in the hotel sector that they often still have to import produce
That's
because
that's a huge market
yes,
to us
yes, yes,
right here in Jamaica. We
yes,
don't have to put things on a ship and send it
yes,
to another country. We have an entire country.
absolutely.
I mean, the number of tourists that come into Jamaica is
Yes,
there's more than the
greater than the
locals.
yes.
population.
Which is why the agri-processing and the cold storage
Yeah,
and things like that are
yeah,
so important to
yeah,
ensure that the quality of the goods getting to the hotels are, to standard
yeah,
because you have carrots and you have carrots.
yeah.
So, so it's a good point. Okay, let's see what else we have out there.
Time out now.
Yes, Kurz is being treated terribly by illicit cigarettes, and so we did speak to that, and yeah, I think in general we've come to the hour. It's amazing how fast the hour has flown when you're having fun. Patrick, I'm going to give you one final question if you have it or comment, and then the last comment to the chairman, and then we'll wrap up. So, Patrick.
No, I think we've covered all of the questions that I had, Dan. So I'll defer to Chairman Berry if he has any closing questions.
Chairman Barry.
Well, I don't have a closing question, but I have a few words. The most important one for me is really a big thank you to the minister for keeping this
You're
tradition
welcome.
going. I think the investors really look forward to it. And the second parting comment would be we have to put some of our best and brightest on this issue of the growth. And not only the growth, but we don't want the continuation of what I call the slave economy. There's too much people too low down, and we need to rack our brains, get our best and brightest, so that people can earn a living wage and we can grow the economy. And if we can do those two things, then I think the dreams of a lot of Jamaicans will come true.
We will use all our energies to do that.
And my last comment will be affordable housing. It's something I really,
Yes.
it's something I
Wow,
really want to
wish we
see
had
the
touched on that.
the
Yes,
NHT
yes.
get more involved in, because again, for the
Or
middle class,
private investors too.
yes, yes, yes. But I think the
Yeah.
NHT has the
NHT
best,
has-
some kind of PPP. But I
Yes,
think the
the
NHT is a
NHG
good
has a couple
anchor
of
for it.
plans.
I know the time
Yeah.
is up, and so I'm not going to start a new point.
Right, but that's an area for me as well.
Yes.
Affordable housing for people.
We may have to
need
have the minister back
yeah.
again. You know, we can't wait till next year. Minister,
Well, that's
perhaps,
up to the minister.
perhaps
She's
after the
very
budget is
busy.
read.
She's not-
Yes,
she
that
don't
would be a
have
good
plenty
time.
time like
That
you.
would
Well, you heard,
that would be a good time.
you heard it, folks. Here, we will try to get the minister back after the budget has been read and we have a better sense as to where we're going in the next fiscal year. So, to our viewers, I want to thank you guys for all being a part of the Virtual Investor Forum as usual. And I want to thank our very special guest, Minister Williams, for coming out today. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you for having me.
So great to have you here. And thank my fellow panelists, Chairman Berry and Patrick Bataille, for their invaluable contributions. Thank you, gentlemen. Folks, remember to follow us on social media to stay up to date with all things forum related. We have a great schedule lined up for you guys this year. So don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mayberry Investments Limited. Thank you to all our viewers, as usual, for tuning in today. Remember, wise investors, slow and steady wins the race. Keep safe, everybody. Bye-bye.